Atelenata Modube, Alafu Mamos. Mamos Media, Walanata Modube, Alafu Mamos. Television on the radio, La Carola, you let her get a be, Molka, you the winning. Multimedia, Africa, and in diaspora, Atalanta Modube, Alafu Mamos. Mamos Media. Multimedia, Africa, what in diaspora. What another Modube, Alafu Mamos.
Good evening and welcome to today's news review. You live on Mamos Radio. I'm your host, Rohi Konatige.
Mamos Media, Atelenata Modube, Alafu Mamos. Nene Bojan Sangarango, oh Nene, Afanabe Oslo, no.
Welcome to Gambia Today, a news review. You're tuned into Mamos Radio on Mamos Media. It is Tuesday, 27th of January 2021. I am Nene with a review of the nation's top headlines. The nation's public broadcaster, GRTS, on auto-cannibalism mode. Momodu. The Gambia Radio and Television Services, GRTS, is chiseling away credibility and chasing away key talent. This could be the beginning of a painful decline of high expectations in public service broadcasting. Should haphazard political strategy, political correctness and cannibalism continue, it would be challenging to bring back the national broadcaster, the GRTS, to the public service broadcasting role as a leading, dependable and credible media house in the country. The grapevine has it that, quote, politically active censorship of individuals and groups, magazine programs critical of the government are censored. Due to waning editorial independence, declining credibility could have a detrimental effect on the nation's broadcaster, GRTS. Momodu, the media landscape is undergoing tremendous transformation, with new digital platforms emerging daily, competing for the same eyeballs and advertising revenue as operatives in the traditional media, and not forgetting formidable competition risks from GRTS. These are challenging times. While GRTS remains relatively healthy on the balance sheet, yet GRTS is bleeding credibility and talent, critical drivers for any prosperous media business. 14 Gambians set to be deported from Germany today. 14 Gambians currently in a detention camp in Germany are set to be deported back home today, subject to Gambia government's approval. These Gambians were arrested by German authorities and were told they will be brought home. It is assumed that their stay has been exhausted after their asylum claims were rejected. Yaya Sonko, the spokesperson of Gambian refugees in Germany, confirmed that a dozen Gambians are set to be brought back. IEC says awarding electoral material contract to local firms risky. The Chief Electoral Officer of the Independent Electoral Commission has told a National Assembly Select Committee that history has shown that the involvement of local companies in the procurement of electoral materials could endanger electoral violence and dispute. At least 3 overseas firms, Electoral Service International, eCamp International and Dermalog, have all expressed interest in the IEC contract alongside Smart Business Group, a Gambian company. The Director General of the Gambia Public Procurement Authority, Salum Malang, said the restriction and including local partnership in awarding the contract is discriminatory and goes contrary to the GPPA Act. The GPPA had also insisted that the TOR should be inputted in the bidding process to spell out exactly what is agreed on. The standard understands all that has now been inputted into the new bidding, which is now being evaluated by the IEC. Lawyers in the Sheriff Sonko and IEC case make final arguments. Lawyers in the civil case involving Sheriff Sonko, the chairperson of Brikama Area Council, and the Independent Electoral Commission have on Tuesday, 26th of January 2021, made their final submission before the Supreme Court. The Apex Court will decide on whether Section 19(1)(g) of the local government is constitutional or not. Lawyer Ida Drame for Sonko said the plaintiff Sonko has constitutional right to association under Section 25. She submitted that in interpreting Section 19(1)(g), the court should do so in consideration of the light and spirit of the Constitution, particularly Sections 25 and 194. Listeners, that was today's news review. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, Nene, for today's news review. Listeners, you live on Mamos Radio. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back. Good evening. I'm your host, Rohi Konategay. On today's news review, Mamos Radio takes a look at the international news making a splash in national newspapers in the United Kingdom and the United States. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Good evening, listeners. I am your presenter, Sainab Njaiba. Thank you for joining me on Mamos Radio as I take a look at the national newspapers' front pages from the United Kingdom this Tuesday. The European Union has announced plans for controls on the export of vaccines amid concerns about supply. That's on the front page of the Times. It comes amid a row between the EU bloc and AstraZeneca. The Daily Mail has an update on its campaign to get computers for children so they can learn from home. Setting up quarantine hotels could at least take 2 weeks, according to the Eye, but the travel industry sources have told Sky News the government plans to announce the measure imminently. The Daily Star considers the possibility of Piers Morgan entering politics. Coronavirus restrictions will not be eased yet. That's from the Health Secretary Matt Hancock in the Daily Express. The Daily Mirror has a plea from children who want to be allowed to return to school. The Daily Telegraph reports that the EU has threatened to block exports from the Belgian-made Pfizer vaccine as part of a row with UK-based AstraZeneca. The country's coronavirus vaccine effort is on the front of the Metro. The Guardian leads with news that the Prime Minister is expected to sign off on rules that would force returning travellers to quarantine in hotels. Moderna is launching trials of a new vaccine aimed at protecting against the coronavirus variant, first reported in South Africa. That's on the front page of the Financial Times. Thank you, listeners. That was the national newspapers' front pages from the United Kingdom. Please stay tuned after the break. Welcome back, listeners. Let's take a closer look at some of the papers, starting off with The Sun. Looks like it's Wagner again. There is The Sun's take on the likelihood of plans for quarantine hotels being introduced for UK arrivals. Travel experts say the move will cost families at least £1,000 extra and wreck plans for foreign breaks. The Guardian says the policy is part of a more cautious approach following England's third lockdown. Details still to be finalized include whether test to release will apply, which currently frees travelers from self-isolation at home if they test negative after 5 days. The Daily Telegraph and the Eye both report that the cabinet is split over the policy. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is said to be fighting for hotel quarantine to only apply to Brazil and South Africa. Health Secretary Matt Hancock and Home Secretary Priti Patel reportedly want all travelers to be subject to the measure. The Daily Mail editorial says the prospect of seeing arrivals herded to a budget hotel by coach and detained for 10 days raises deeply troubling questions. It asks how long such draconian measures will last and what it will take for them to be lifted. Better late than never is the view of the Times in its leader, as it expresses its support for a policy it deems painful but necessary. The paper says whilst the UK's airline and tourism sectors will lose out, it would be inexcusable to jeopardize world-beating progress on vaccines by opening borders to mutations of the virus. Brussels threatens to block vaccine is the headline of the Daily Telegraph's main story. It reports that Britain's supply of the Belgian Pfizer jab is in jeopardy after UK-based AstraZeneca said it could only deliver a fraction of its order for the EU. Ministers apparently believe stock from Pfizer could be at best delayed by extra paperwork as the EU looks to retaliate. MPs think the row is part of the EU's attempt to deflect blame away from their failure to get a vaccination scheme off the ground, with one senior Conservative calling the bloc's response childish and spiteful. We just want to go back to school is the plea from children on the front of the Daily Mirror. A survey conducted by the paper has found that 70% of children in the UK believe their health and future have been negatively affected by the lockdown. These children's wishes could soon come true, according to the Times. It reports that government advisors have concluded primary schools can safely reopen after half-term if cases continue to fall. And finally, back to the Sun, which reports that parts of the new James Bond film are going to have to be refilmed because of the delays in its release caused by the spy's technology to become out of date. Old Tech Bond back in the queue is the paper's headline, in a nod to one of the famous characters in the franchise. An insider has suggested while some scenes can be very carefully edited, sponsors will expect their lucrative deals to be properly honored. Thank you, listeners. That was the UK's national newspapers front pages review with your presenter, Sainab Jaiba. Thank you for tuning into Mamos Radio. Do have a pleasant evening.
We'll be back with the Mandinka News with Lamin Marong.
Assalamu alaikum badi ngolum bali kuntuna toluna le kuntundi mala annal badi ma lamin maron dol kay kiyam man sam felen dunta kondalta ka kibaro men futandale wato wati Mamos la radi bumbato kana wol kale bi janinka ke fonsi molunin ka folu tentu men ya lonko kan sambentu ya fana bela en kono tridi gamna kafu bambe tentu la kafu nyaton kul kafu dingol me gambe bantala be tentu la duku kendola anima nene on Mamos Media Foundation be gambe fana be tentu la be duku kendo nyimena anen Mamos la duku la be gambe bantalam ba fole ala barka bake ala keke ndela nsemenke na kibaro kun folo di ala janun kadun kibaro nyum fama kono iko na safer la jato menketa alhaji professor alhaji Yoro Jallo membe Harvard University America afanan kaman alo nyamen ka safero menke ayala wose itandi wala kibaru kuno akombading ni mira Gambia na television bumba ani na radio bumba memo TST akunyi watulu manyame mbekeka warukuwa mbekeka ni mekeku la dokula jatulu esike yefono jamala natra imangferulu landi puruka falendiro kala mbo kibaru fudandalalma ane konyi waro fana Gambia no men dole be sabatrin Germany be mutarokono e konyi watulu ibe sendila sakumenkete biti ibe sendila Gambia banko kan tumumena na Gambia mansokunda ani Germany la mansokunda dakorta ko puriye sainde Gambia banko kan e kibar bunda men safe umu point la newspaper te ICC membe maralin Gambia na katre fayo lanya la Gambia e konyi watulu ye kachake ening National Assembly dibite bumbala ye kafubame law pour membe kolsiro ke kan nyin katre fayo lanya la Gambia iko ba fala ko nyin watulu enen company lumene ya lonko wala d'accord pour ka fero ke election joran lumene ya lonko nyanta ke dokundi pour si Gambia election o keno nyamen ikoni watulu inin company d'accordta waran company jamalu lefta pour ka o do ko nyinta standard la newspaper lo sama safe mbo fana futandalma lawyer sonko lawyer anin mr sonko menkera brikamara area council la nyaton koti ikoni watulu ala lawyer ya kachaluke ko ibe d'accord bring tumo men ya samana anin electoral independent electoral commission menkena IECT ikoni watulu ibe korse ke kan ila kiti nyina wo kibaro nyi fanan bo fanan futandalma nsemenke don adun kibaro nyi famo kono na keba safar laba menketa professor alhaji yoro jallo ayni fo akombading ninga mankora sirke GRTS menketa na Gambia radio and television bumba nyintu ko ibe bayro ke kan ware be nyaka sikan ke ila dukula kendolu ni watulu nime hakilutu wolto e fola jamalala akonni benekela kuti me alonko abe fondela ku jamalala anu mole sota mole sembentu ya menke ware farmanso menkela nyimbatina ya hamulu menke wara mole men hameto itnawul be ma fala no ako nina ta jibe ye ferulu mellande nina ta politiko la fannala anun kaje ko politiko la kulu men yalon ko nyanda ke korse ke sambani silola nimo wolke bar foka dum ka foko be nyu tonyele kera wara be nyu tinyale kala nyimbe kera kudume yalon ko abe isabotala bake wara be mantoro la bake fanna jamala nima ferulu landi purka wolu bayi ako GRTS natalo drone purka ka Gambia be nafa waranka kibar kendodi Gambia bela anu nyanda katina le GRTS ke kibar bundati me ya lonko atleka ke atasikeno nyaton koti ni na kibar dio la Gambia baykan akobari la kolu la nyalu anu ka kolu me ya lonko kibaro nyanda ka wolelu sembentu ya waranke i bondi wolu beka kisi le janni ba fale ba futan la muluma waranka fo be mulu fon kilikilin la kibaro men kanu purko le kisi waranka fo ka folu waran gurpolu men ya lonko la fraka kibaro bon kolu be kisi nyimbe kala fente me ya lonko abe kibela kibar dio waran mole lama ya men sototo nyimbe obe talala de akoni na rajibem fanan itolie labulo me landi an molie lano menkela nima wol falindi nyimbatin nale jiko mole me hameto nyimbe wol fanan abebe murun la komale akombading ni na rajiben saimbe tembo nyumento na kibar dio membe kekan waran kibar bundalu membe Gambia sain nkeda kutume ya lonko ay mola korsiri sile kantun lungolung kibar bunda kutol lelbe lokan wala be finde kan Gambia anu ñun bebe pare na pour que tesiti pour ka joko julayani safaro me ya lonko wala be la media ñun samandila pour asikeno ño sabotu ni ñamen pour ka kodo men dokundi me ya lonko ni na advertisement ne kamenke Gambia pour isu ño sabokeno anyi keda kudo me ya lonko ñi media kudo men ka findi ibe ñabe kukelo ñina kan a coordinator dum GRTS men nyanda kake nyaton koti ni nata nyinto ni bu ko to korsi nyimbe kala kudo me ya lonko abine batandela la ako ngalone sayin ibe tembo nyimento kolu mantra soni arin ko to le hame nyamin ba nata yo kolu ke ka nyanda kake nyamin nyanda ke kudo me ya lonko nyanda ka soni ate to le bulle ako ngalo na hani nyawnyang hani sain sembo belale ni I pareta purka kulu landi ko nyanda ka kanyamen natra ya ilafta ka do koke ka itende molla ko itulu molisi lama ne no lale molisi ka kibaro men bondi molsa alama ya nole anila doku nyafa na molsa kanu nole ni yenyinke nyimbekera kude me ya lonko at sota al sotla ani men hame isabe sot nole ba ni nyaka sinyunula iminakala media me alonko pour que murndinang ka keno media me alonko be kala nyaton ko de pour nyindo la noma ko be kole ala bakel kibar dila me safe wala mo professor alaji yoro jallo to membe America ko ngalonko safe la jato atle en kibaro nyindi ya kibaro men fana bonoma e ko ñu watu le mentata fo motan ani nani gambiano le menbe jamande e nyanda kamen sainde bi e ko ñu gambiano lu e be sabatin ila kampoloto me ya lon ko ye muta anu dolbe je asaymol dundi jamani anu woni nata ke ko gudu me ya lon ko lolu banta e ko bani ñu sainde nya gambia aketa kuto me ya lon ko gambia la mansa kundala sonta pour que sainde na gambia ako ñu ye muta jamani banko la kan jamani la mansa kundale muta anu nyanda ke sainde na gambia banko nyinkan ako nyen la sababu ye wato men dila jaman banko kan wala banta ani asala mum fanan dunta ye men dundi ye balwo fananale yaya sonko me ya lonko atlekeda dila diamulati gambia la refugee war luntawol men ya lonko asala mo dundi jamani ay nyim fobi ako molbe kono le me ya lonko e be sanela gambia banko kan kibar bunda men safe wala mo point la newspaper te ni IEC ikonyi watolu ibe molelu warebe kafolelu tolokan meni ya lonko walel bekela nyin carte final alti me ya lonko walel be maralin carte fa joron men nyanda keno dokuranti gambia kan akonyi aynin kachanyi banke biritu men na député bumbali kafomelo pour se korsiroke ni nata nyin carte fa kunyala gambia akonyi nata kafulu waran company le meni ya lonko ibela la fo itandile pour ka ke kafuti membe face à rokela war membe joron nyina pour nyi election nyi menkana wara nyi carte fo menkana ako ngalonne tar ko liya yitandinnale ko ni ko be nyin dila company la me ya lonko amanke IEC famoti nyin kana ke fitno lo wulindi wara kana mamma lo wulinde banko kani me keko anu nyi menkeda the director general ti me ya lonko wala be marali nyi kunyalam menkeda salum malang ay nyi fo ako nyi ko nyi menke e be blodi kan company lale me ya lonko e bol korsela pour kaje wala be marala ko nyi carte fo nyi memina aji GPPA me ya lonko wala be sembo dile la pour ka nyi ko nyi be ma fa ay nyi fo ako nyi keda kuti me ya long e be lafla ka ke kuti pour kafo lefta pour ke dake pour be sa keno ako bani nyinke kute me ya lonko e nyanta ka ferolu wara mellandi pour momo lafta pour ka waran kafo lafta pour ke dakaje pour asikeno ay yelono pour momo lafta pour ke la lafo nyi yitande kibar bunda men safe wala mo standard la newspaper de lawyer Sonko lawyer Sonko ala lawyer Sirfo Sonko ala lawyer Mayor Lonko anin IEC biriye kolu samba kite bundala meme maraling Brikama area council la at lawyer Mayor Lonko wale maraling Sirfo Sonko la kite nyina anun the chairman memo biri atlem dum Sirfo Sonko atlemu chairman ti Brikama area council ti anin independent electoral commissioner nyintala da tambla to babakaro tilmon ani woro wale nada sen pour ka fuda kiti bundara pour ka korsirke ko luwanye mulalande pour Sirfo Sonko la nyin kiti nyinto awol nyin loya afindita ayala konyin banke ko luwanyi nyanda ka Sirfo Sonko ka tolo ni nata luwanyi na tunkungola tunkun tan anin kononto jangola ala tunkun kilingo nyinto wayni tande ko luwanyi menefo pourquoi Sirfo Sonko aya sembentu yale pour ala palaso nyinto menketa loya Aida Drame atlemo Sirfo Sonko la loyati ana yin banke ko luwanyi ne ya di luwanyi men saveta na local government masakuna ringola luwanyi men saveta ala tunkun mon ani lulu njangolo ay nyim banke ako nyunu be ya sembentu yale ani ni nata la fanna tan kononte njangola nyunu be ya sembentu yale prabe do ko nyim mena ay continue anu nyin kada fande fanan akone koroslo ko fanan ala tunkun mon ani lulu njangala kata ala keme tan kononto ani nani njangala nyin be keda kutume ya lonko akay sembo di Mr Sonko lale kibar bunda men safe wala mu fore ala newspaper de mbadu nyina mu kibarote mu fotana me tembenna pour ka fotan dalma nabe tata ko ma solo no la ninga fo ma fo kun sawnda al salo na haramadi na soda malamu anal badi malami maron dol kay kiyam sambal ni bara fo nyatondo.
Thank you, listeners. That was the end of tonight's news review and commentary from the Mamos team.
Mamos media, Atlanta Modebe, Alafu Mamos. Mamos media, wala nata Modebe, Alafu Mamos. Television on the radio, la Carola, you let the Jetabi, Morka, you the winning. Multimedia Africa Atrenada modube kalamu Mamos. Mamos Media. Multimedia Africa winning diaspora. Wala nata modube